if you look at the senior NLD members who are part of the NUG, it's part of their DNA, right? The democracy, federalism, liberal worldview, actually not very liberal, but let's say Western worldview, talk about human rights, these kind of things. This is deeply embedded in the DNA of the NLD. And so, or at least those members of the NLD. And then if you look at the other members of the NUG, the acting president, the prime minister, these are Christian ethnic minority people, not automatically friendly to China. One is Kachin, a senior Kachin person, who China would view with a little bit of skepticism as well, because they view the Kachin with some skepticism. And Karen, a senior Karen person, who, again, Karen Christian, not someone who is automatically seen in a positive light by China. So it's quite hard for the NUG, I think, to convince China that it has its interest, because the NUG and the NLD have been so kind of linked to Washington and human rights and democracy and Aung San Suu Kyi's approach and so on. Now, China is quite positive to Aung San Suu Kyi, because when she was state councillor, she did not take an anti-Chinese stance. In fact, some would say she took too much of a pro-Chinese stance. So they're quite comfortable with her, but I don't think they are very comfortable with the NLD in general. And certainly not the NUG and its human rights, Spring Revolution kind of, this is almost a kind of milk tea alliance kind of organization for China, right? This is Taiwan, this is this is revolution, this is not Communist Party of China kind of orthodoxy. So it's very hard. Now, of course, Washington has changed. Washington has changed a lot over the last 100 days. And so it is no longer the case that anyone could say that Washington is supportive of democracy promotion in other countries, right? Quite the opposite. Washington today, Trump White House, is very much against these kind of democracy promotion things and liberal worldview, very suspicious of it. So I think, Washington is more suspicious actually of the NUG, or would be if it thought about it. I don't think the White House has spent any time thinking about the NUG, but if it did, it would probably be quite suspicious of the NUG. And this gives an opening for the NUG to change its relationship in the region and with China, potentially. Because now they can say, we are not closely aligned with Washington, because Washington is a very different Washington, right? But can they do that? Will they do that? I mean, I think they should. I think the only sensible way forward for the NUG is to reorient its relationships to Asia, to ASEAN, to China. These are the countries that need to understand the NUG, and which the NUG needs to convince that it is not a threat to these countries. And if it can do that, this will be very beneficial, I think, for the NUG. But it's a huge shift. It's a huge shift, and it's especially a huge shift for some old people who have had a certain way of thinking for a very long time. It's not easy to do this kind of shift. So.